It was supposed to be just another quiet morning in County Cork. But inside a small house on Grattan Street, something unthinkable was buried, literally. When officers broke through the old concrete floor, they weren't expecting what came next. A foul, musty smell rose into the air, and within minutes the room turned silent. Beneath the cracked surface lay human remains, carefully wrapped, hidden deep under the home itself. The news spread like wildfire. A missing woman's body had been found right under her own house, a house she had shared with her husband. But the real shock, she had been missing for 6 long years, and everyone had believed she'd simply left. Her name was Tina Satchwell, a 45-year-old woman who had suddenly vanished in 2017, leaving behind her car, her 2 dogs, her passport, and even her keys. For years, people speculated, had she run away, was she kidnapped, or had something darker happened behind closed doors? Now, after years of silence, the truth was beginning to crawl back from the concrete. Police immediately sealed off the area, forensic tents surrounded the small home, and neighbors watched in disbelief. Many had known Tina as cheerful, kind, and a bit private, but nothing about her life had ever hinted at something this horrific. Reporters soon swarmed the narrow street, cameras flashing as officers carried out evidence bags one after another. Before we dive in, just a quick note. On this channel, we upload 3 true crime and murder mystery stories every week. If you love chilling, suspense-filled cases that keep you guessing till the very end, make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss one. Tina was originally from Fermoy, a small town in County Cork. She met Richard Satchwell, a truck driver from England, while working at a hotel years earlier. The two fell deeply in love, got married, and later settled in the seaside town of Youghal, a quiet area known more for its beaches than for crime. For most people, they looked like a normal couple. But behind the walls of their small home, things weren't always peaceful. Friends would later say that Tina had been struggling. She had grown distant, sometimes emotional, sometimes afraid. There were rumors of arguments, of tension, and of a woman who seemed trapped between wanting to stay and needing to escape. But nobody really knew what was going on, because Tina never spoke openly about her troubles. Then came March 20th, 2017. That was the day Tina Satchwell disappeared. According to her husband, she simply walked out. Richard claimed she'd packed a few bags, taken some cash, and left after an argument. He told everyone she needed a break, that she was heading to her family in Fermoy. But she never arrived there. Days passed, then weeks. Richard continued giving interviews, standing in front of the cameras, saying he was heartbroken that he just wanted his wife to come home. He insisted she wasn't missing. She'd just chosen to leave. And since there was no immediate sign of foul play, the case slowly cooled down. But something didn't add up. Tina's family said she'd never leave without her dogs. She adored them. Her passport and bank cards were still at home. There was no CCTV of her leaving, and most of all, nobody had heard from her since that day. Still with no solid evidence, the investigation faded into the background. Richard eventually sold their home and moved into a new place in Youghal. He continued living quietly, appearing on TV once in a while, always insisting Tina was alive somewhere. But the truth, as investigators would later discover, was buried closer than anyone imagined. 6 long years went by. And then, in March 2023, detectives received fresh information, something credible enough to reopen the entire case. The Gardaí Irish police launched a full search of Richard Satchwell's home on Grattan Street. What started as a routine dig quickly turned into a full-scale crime scene. Inside the house, beneath the solid floor of a storage area, forensic teams uncovered human remains, It took only hours before suspicion turned toward the one man who had always claimed to be innocent. As news broke, the town of Youghal froze. People who had known Richard for years could hardly believe it. The man who once begged for his wife's return was now being led away in handcuffs. And for the first time in 6 years, Tina's family finally had an answer, though it was the kind of answer no one ever wants. But even with a body found, questions remained. Why was Tina killed? When did it happen? And how could someone live above the very secret that destroyed so many lives? Because as investigators dug deeper, they realized this case wasn't just about a missing person. It was about years of hidden pain, manipulation, and a truth that had been buried twice, once in silence and once in stone. When the remains were found beneath the floor, the silence in Youghal broke like glass. Within hours, the small seaside town became the center of Ireland's biggest missing person investigation in years. Police vans lined the street, forensic officers in white suits moved in and out of the tiny house, and news reporters camped outside, waiting for confirmation of what everyone already feared. By the next morning, it was official. The body was that of Tina Satchwell. For years, people had believed she simply vanished, maybe started a new life somewhere. But the truth was darker, colder, and much closer. Inside that small home, under the very ground where Richard Satchwell had lived, slept, and given interviews, Tina had been hidden. Detectives immediately arrested Richard and began an intense round of questioning. His calm public image quickly faded. Inside the interview room, he was no longer the grieving husband. He was the prime suspect in a murder that had haunted Ireland for 6 years. Officers went through every inch of his house. Beneath the new floor tiles, they found not only Tina's remains, but also signs that the floor had been redone. Layers of concrete poured unevenly, tools recently cleaned. It was clear that someone had gone to great lengths to hide something permanent. What stunned investigators even more was how ordinary the life above that floor had been. For years, Richard lived there as if nothing had happened, watching TV, cooking meals, and giving interviews from the same place where the truth lay, buried beneath his feet. Neighbors recalled seeing him walk his dogs, greet people on the street, and even talk fondly of Tina. Some remembered him saying she had gone to live abroad. Others said he often repeated that she needed space, but none could ever imagine that her body was just a few feet away the entire time. In one interview years earlier, Richard had looked straight into the camera and said, "I know she's out there somewhere." That line now sent chills down the country's spine. Investigators began piecing together the timeline. The last confirmed sighting of Tina was in March 2017. After that, her entire digital presence stopped. No phone calls, no messages, no bank activity. Her social media went silent overnight. But there was one detail that caught attention. A series of purchases made shortly after her disappearance. Construction supplies, bags of cement, sand, a wheelbarrow, all bought within days of when Tina supposedly left. When questioned, Richard had explanations for everything. He said he was doing home repairs. He said the timing was just coincidence. But as forensic evidence grew stronger, the coincidences vanished. Tina's family, who had never believed she'd walked away, were heartbroken, yet relieved that the truth had finally surfaced. For 6 long years they'd searched, begged, and hoped, even setting up pages and appeals online. Each time, Richard would respond, saying she had chosen to stay away. But now, standing before cameras again, he looked different, pale, silent, and cornered by the weight of what was finally uncovered. Gardaí charged him with murder. The quiet husband who once played the part of a man waiting for his wife's return was now accused of ending her life and hiding her body under their own floor. As investigators reconstructed the events of March 2017, a clearer and more horrifying picture began to emerge. In the weeks before her disappearance, Tina had been feeling anxious. Friends said she had confided about money problems and emotional stress. She'd told one relative that she planned to leave Richard for a while, not because she didn't love him, but because she needed peace. And then suddenly, she was gone. The theory police began to explore was chilling. That Tina may have told Richard she wanted to leave, and that conversation turned deadly. Whether in anger, panic, or control, something had gone terribly wrong inside that home. Instead of reporting an accident, Richard had allegedly buried the truth. But perhaps the most disturbing part of all was how he managed to live for years pretending nothing had happened. He went on TV, spoke to newspapers, and even asked the public to stop judging him. He said he missed Tina every day. And all that time, the truth was right below his feet. The case sent shockwaves across Ireland. It wasn't just a story of murder. It was a story about deception, control, and the terrifying possibility that someone could hide such horror in plain sight for so long. People began revisiting old interviews, watching them again, this time noticing things they hadn't before, the nervous smiles, the shifting eyes, the rehearsed lines. Every word now sounded like a cover-up. After the arrest, police continued working around the clock to find out when and how Tina was killed. The forensic team analyzed bone fragments, fabrics, and residue from the surrounding soil. The condition of the remains suggested she had been there from the very start, that the crime wasn't recent. The timeline matched one chilling idea. Tina never left that house alive. Reporters followed every update, and the case reignited conversations about domestic abuse and hidden violence behind closed doors. For many, Tina's story wasn't just tragic. It was a reflection of how easily truth can be buried when no one is looking close enough. And as the trial date drew nearer, the one question that kept haunting everyone was simple yet powerful. Why? What could drive someone to silence the person they claimed to love? And how could he look into cameras for years, pretending to be a victim himself? The answers, it seemed, were still locked inside the man who had fooled an entire country. But there was one final twist waiting. Something that would make Tina's case even more haunting than anyone expected. Because when investigators dug deeper into Richard's past, they discovered that the cracks in his story didn't start in 2017. They started long before that. And those cracks would finally reveal the truth about what really happened to Tina Satchwell. After 6 years of mystery, the truth was finally coming to light. But what emerged from Richard Satchwell's past made the story even darker. As Gardaí dug through his history, they found a man with two faces. One public, gentle and soft-spoken, and another private, cold and controlling. People who knew the couple began stepping forward, sharing stories that painted a completely different picture of their marriage. Behind closed doors, Tina's life wasn't peaceful. She often felt isolated, afraid to speak freely, and dependent on Richard for everything. Friends recalled that she would cancel visits at the last minute, saying she wasn't allowed to go out. Sometimes she hinted that things at home were not right, but she never gave details. Those subtle signs, the small cries for help, were now being seen in a new, tragic light. During the trial, prosecutors revealed what investigators had uncovered inside that house, evidence of long-term control and emotional abuse. Richard had carefully managed how Tina lived, who she spoke to, and even where she went. When she finally decided to leave him, it might have been the one thing he couldn't accept. In the courtroom, the man who had once appeared heartbroken now looked distant, emotionless. He sat quietly as the prosecution described how Tina's life ended, how, on that March morning in 2017, a simple argument turned into a deadly confrontation. They presented evidence of freshly poured concrete, receipts of building materials bought days after her disappearance, and traces of blood that matched Tina's DNA. Every piece fit perfectly into the puzzle, a puzzle he'd tried to bury under cement and silence. As the trial continued, one thing became clear. Richard had never planned to report her missing. He had carefully built a story to cover his tracks. He told neighbors that Tina was visiting family, then said she'd gone abroad. When family called, he claimed she needed space. He even messaged people from her account once, just to keep the illusion alive. But as investigators showed, those lies couldn't last forever. For 6 years, the truth was waiting beneath the floor. And now, justice was finally catching up. In court, Tina's family sat quietly, tears in their eyes. Her sister later said, "We prayed for answers, but never expected this." They had spent years hoping she'd walk through the door one day, but instead they were faced with the horror that she'd been there all along, in the very place she'd once called home. As the trial reached its final days, Richard's defense tried to claim he never intended to kill her, that it was an accident, a sudden reaction in anger. But the evidence was overwhelming. The lies, the concealment, the calculated effort to hide her, it all pointed toward intent, not accident. When the verdict was finally read, the courtroom went silent. Guilty. Richard Satchwell was convicted of Tina's murder. For a moment he showed no reaction, no shock, no tears, just a blank stare. Outside, people gathered holding pictures of Tina, candles flickering in their hands. Her case had become a symbol, a reminder of how silence and control can destroy lives behind perfectly normal walls. For her family, the verdict didn't erase the pain, but it gave them something they'd been denied for years: the truth. After the sentencing, the details that had once been buried began surfacing publicly. Friends shared how Tina had always dreamed of a peaceful life, of moving to the countryside, maybe keeping a few animals and living quietly. Those dreams ended the moment she decided to stand up for herself. Her case sparked national discussion in Ireland about domestic violence, how easy it is to miss the signs, how hard it is for victims to speak, and how long justice can take when there's no body, no witness, and no sound. But what truly haunted everyone was how close the truth had always been, right under the floor, in the very place she trusted most. In the weeks after the trial, the house on Grattan Street was sealed off for good. Neighbors said they couldn't walk past it without feeling a chill. The small window, the old stone walls, everything about it now told a story that no one wanted to remember. And yet, for those who knew Tina, her memory became stronger than ever. They described her as gentle, kind, and full of life. Someone who loved her dogs, loved her family, and never deserved the ending she got. Today, her grave in Fermoy has become a quiet place of reflection, a place where her family finally has somewhere to visit, somewhere to speak to her, somewhere to grieve. But even now, one mystery still lingers. What exactly happened that morning? What were Tina's last words? Did she ever realize what was about to happen? Those answers may never come. Only one person truly knows, and he chose to bury them forever beneath the floor. In the end, the Tina Satchwell case became more than just another crime story. It became a lesson in how truth can stay hidden for years, covered by lies, cement, and silence, until one small crack finally lets it escape. A woman who everyone thought had disappeared had been there all along, waiting to be found. And when she finally was, the entire world was reminded that no secret stays buried forever.